I've photographed war zones, abandoned cities, and places where hundreds of people died. But nothing in my career prepared me for the river I found in that African village. Because when I dived beneath its surface to take the perfect photo, I discovered the villagers weren't afraid of the river. They were afraid of what was living inside it. My name is Daniel Carter, and I'm a photojournalist. I've spent years chasing strange stories across the world. War zones, abandoned cities, places where people say terrible things happened. Most of the time, fear disappears once you shine a light on it. That's what I believed before I went to that river. My company had heard rumors about a small river deep in a rural African village. According to the villagers, the river was cursed. No one fished there. No one fetched water from it. They said the river was possessed and that strange artifacts rested beneath its surface. Ancient objects no one dared retrieve. My editor didn't believe in curses. He believed in good stories. So they sent me to photograph the artifacts. When I arrived at the village, the atmosphere felt wrong. People stopped talking when they saw me. Children who had been laughing moments before suddenly ran inside their homes. An elderly man eventually approached me while I unpacked my camera equipment. "You came for the river," he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. His eyes darkened with something that looked like genuine fear. "That river does not like strangers," he whispered, "and it does not like being watched." I smiled politely and explained that I only needed photographs, nothing more. The old man shook his head slowly. "You will take something from the river," he said, "and the river will take something from you." No one in the village agreed to guide me there, but someone eventually pointed toward a narrow trail, disappearing into thick forest. I set out the next morning alone. The walk to the river started normally enough. Birds chirped overhead and insects hummed in the trees. Sunlight filtered through the leaves in soft golden patches. But the deeper I walked, the quieter the forest became. First, the birds disappeared. Then the insects stopped buzzing. Eventually, the silence became so complete that I could hear my own breathing echo through the trees. That was when I reached the river. It was smaller than I expected, narrow, dark, and surrounded by thick trees that leaned inward as if trying to hide it. But what unsettled me most was the water. It was perfectly still, not calm still. Even when leaves dropped onto the surface, the water barely moved. I raised my camera and took a photo. The shutter click sounded too loud in the silence. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the water shifted, not like a current, more like something beneath the surface had slowly rolled over. I crouched near the riverbank and looked through the lens again. That's when I saw them, shapes beneath the water. Stone objects resting on the riverbed, artifacts, statues, masks, carved stones, exactly what my company had hoped for, but something about them looked strange. They weren't scattered naturally across the riverbed. They were arranged in patterns, almost like a circle, and the faces carved into the stone masks looked wrong. Long mouths stretched into unnatural smiles, hollow eyes carved deeper than they should be. I stepped closer to the edge of the river for a better angle. The water was surprisingly clear near the bank. Through the lens, I could see the artifacts perfectly, and deeper below them, half buried in mud, more shapes, larger ones. I adjusted the zoom. They weren't rocks. They looked like statues of people, human-shaped figures lying across the riverbed, arms reaching upward as if frozen mid. A strange unease crawled up my spine, but the photographer in me wanted the perfect shot. To capture the artifacts properly, I needed to get closer, much closer. I removed my boots, set my camera strap tightly around my neck, and stepped into the river. The water was colder than I expected, painfully cold. It wrapped around my legs like icy fingers. The deeper I stepped, the thicker it felt, as if the water itself resisted my movement. Still, the artifacts were just a few feet away. I took another photograph, then another. The light underwater created perfect contrast across the carving, but I knew the best shot would come from beneath the surface. I took a deep breath and dived. The cold hit my body instantly, shocking every nerve in my skin. Underwater, the river was darker than it should have been. Sunlight barely reached the bottom, leaving the artifacts resting in dim green shadows. I swam down toward them. Through the camera lens, the carvings looked even more disturbing up close. The masks weren't smiling. They were screaming. Long open mouths stretched wide in silent agony, and the human-shaped statues weren't statues at all. They were bodies. or at least shapes that looked far too much like boats. Their arms reached upward through the water, fingers twisted as if clawing toward the surface. Their faces were buried in mud. I felt a sudden urge to leave, but I lifted my camera and snapped another photo. The flash burst brightly underwater. For a brief second, the entire riverbed lit up, and that was when I realized something terrifying. There weren't just a few beings, there were hundreds, layered across the riverbed, stacked on top of each other, all reaching upward. My lungs burned, reminding me I needed air. I pushed upward and broke through the surface with a gasp. The forest around the river remained completely silent, but something had changed. The water was no longer still. Small ripples spread slowly outward from the spot where I had surfaced, as if something beneath the water had begun to move. I wiped water from my eyes and glanced down. The surface reflected the sky above, and my reflection, except the reflection didn't match my movement. I tilted my head, but the reflection stayed still. Then slowly, it smiled. My heart slammed in my chest. I stumbled backward in the water, nearly dropping my camera. The river rippled again. This time, the movement came from directly below me. Something brushed against my leg, a long, cold shape sliding through the water. I froze. Then the whispering began, soft at first, like distant voices speaking underwater. Dozens of them, maybe more. The whispers surrounded me from every direction. I couldn't understand the words, but they sounded excited. The water shifted again. This time something rose from the riverbed. A hand, gray and swollen, its skin stretched tightly across thin bones. It broke the surface slowly. Then another hand appeared, and another. All around me, the water began to swell as more shapes rose upward. Faces emerged from the river one by one, rotting faces covered in mud and river weeds. Eyes open, all staring at me. The whispers grew louder. No longer whispers, voices. Hundreds of voices speaking together in a wet, gurgling chorus. I tried to move, but the water around my legs felt thicker now, almost like mud pulling me downward. A tall figure rose slowly from the center of the river, much taller than the others. Its body stretched unnaturally long, limbs bending at angles that didn't look human. Water poured from its hollow eye sockets. Its mouth opened far wider than any human jaw could stretch, and when it spoke, every other voice fell silent. "You saw us." The voice sounded like bubbling water forced through broken lungs. "You woke us." The surface of the river exploded with movement. Hands grabbed at the water around me, bodies pushing upward from the depths. I struggled toward the bank, my legs barely moving through the thick water. Something grabbed my ankle, cold fingers tightening around bone. I kicked wildly until the grip loosened, just enough for me to stumble onto the muddy shore. Behind me, the river churned violently. Dozens of faces broke the surface, watching me from the dark water, waiting. I grabbed my camera and ran. I didn't stop until the village appeared through the trees. When I finally looked at the photographs later that night, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. The pictures showed the artifacts clearly. The masks, the bodies beneath the river, but the final photograph was the worst. The one I took underwater with the flash. In the background of the image, behind the layers of bodies, something else stood upright on the riverbed. Something tall, something watching me through the camera lens, and its mouth was open in a smile that stretched from ear to ear.